Welcome to episode 5 of the Crew 1 podcast out here on Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire, enjoying a day. On this episode, I have my friend Kiersten Aldridge. She's a new friend of mine, a past co-worker. Kiersten's got a lot of cool things to say on all the weird stuff I like to talk about. She grew up in a haunted house, and she's got some stories about that. We talk about UFOs, UAPs, spirituality, a whole range of things. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did having it. Welcome to the Crew 1 podcast. A version of my logo, actually.
I love that. You're so fun.
My logo with the hand. So I took inspiration from Hunter S. Thompson, and then also like the art of Pink Floyd. And I kind of I used AI to make it, and I kind of prompted it to, because at Hunter S. Thompson's funeral, he set off a bunch of fireworks, and he had like this hand. It was actually a three-fingered hand. I can't remember exactly, but I know they were shooting guns and setting fireworks off, and they had a giant statue of a fist at Hunter S. Thompson's funeral. There's videos of it online, but he's probably one of my favorite authors. So for some reason his stories keep rattling around in my head, and I've done like a really bad impression of him in some aspects of my life with the traveling that I've done, and I don't know. It's but I really like the backgrounds that are coming of it, so it's
I love that.
Fun.
Yeah, you're such a Rolling Stone. I feel like you resonate with him.
A Rolling Stone. I don't really like the Rolling Stones. They have a couple of good songs, but it's good to see you again. Welcome to the Crew 1 podcast. Let's start with where you're at in the paranormal world, and in this, you've had some experiences in your life, and you grew up in a place that was kind of conducive to that. Can you kind of tell me about your childhood home? And
this like genre has weirdly always been like threaded into my life. I feel like I kind of grew up with a dad who was like watching all of those like weird like Bigfoot shows, UFOs, all of those fun conspiracies. So it was kind of like embedded in me to be like interested in that stuff. I'll never forget when I was in like 8th grade. I think my first this was like back when like PowerPoint presentations were just becoming like a thing. I did my PowerPoint presentation in like 6th grade on like UFOs. So I'm sure everybody thought I was like a major freak, but I just loved it. I did. But yeah, no, it's been such a weird world. I feel like I have always had this like sensitivity to like ghosts and like seeing things and seeing ghosts and seeing apparitions. And it was a really cool journey when I was younger to go through that. I was like a kind of kid that would like walk into a historic building and see something and ask my mom about it, and she would kind of build that up and be like, I remember she like called a place one time and was like, hey, my daughter saw like a bellhop, is that like something that's happened? And they're like, yeah, that's an actual ghost that's been sighted here before. So I feel like I always had that, like, I guess sensitivity is like a good word. I wouldn't say I was like a medium or like anything like that, but I always knew there was something beyond like the world we were living in, the dimension we're living in. And my favorite story about that is I grew up in Northeast Philly. I, lived in a single home for a long time, 26 years with my parents. And for that entire time, I've always had like weird experiences there. So I would see 2 ghosts, actually. One that was like, I used to describe as like maybe 1800s. She had like a white gown on. She was very much like older, and she was always just kind of curious, not like a threatening presence. Same with the second apparition I would always see was like one of an old man and a dog. And my favorite story, and I feel like I was gaslit for a long time by my parents, but weird things would always happen. Things would fall off shelves unexplained. I remember one time, like, we had 2 bedrooms upstairs and then a bathroom. And there was a time when like the faucet from the tub went on full force. Like it wasn't like a tiny trickle. It was like somebody fully turned that thing on and it was just like out by itself. I would always have like weird experiences, especially in the basement. And it took like 23 years, I'll never forget, of, telling my parents about these things, them kind of like brushing things off. I had this really cool neighbor who was like this old woman, this old Italian woman. She was like in her 80s. She was very kooky. She always would say like, I still to this day don't know what this means, but she would say like I was born with a thin veil over my head, like I'm a medium, things like that. And I would tell her about the ghosts I saw. And I remember one time I described this old man, and she said, "Oh, that sounds like the guy who lived there before you." I told my parents that. They were like, "Yeah, could be, maybe." Always kind of just like brushed it aside. And it all kind of came to fruition the day I moved out of that house. And I finally said, like, what is the story with like this old guy? And they said, well, actually, it turns out that the owner prior to us had, I don't know if it was suicide. I don't know if it was just like an accident, if he was like drunk or something. But I found out that that man had like died in that home by falling asleep in his garage with like the door closed. He fell asleep with his foot like on the pedal, so the fumes killed him and rose to the second floor and killed his dog. So like all this time I'm like I'm telling you what I saw, and like nobody was like, actually you're spot on. That is exactly it. So that was like a big confirmation for me, and I just like I love thinking that there's something else out there because, as science says, we're all energy, and once energy is, out of the body, it goes somewhere. So like, where's that existence?
What was your interaction? What were the nature of your interactions with the ghost, and like how often would you see it?
Yeah, when I was younger, I think it was a lot, honestly. I would see them like multiple times a week, and it was always, you could always feel that it wasn't like a dark energy or an evil energy. Um, and it was always like in the corner of your eye. Like I can never say that I looked dead on and saw like a ghost the way you see in movies. It was never like, oh wow, that is like a true human form. I know exactly what that is. It was always kind of like you're sitting at a computer desk and you kind of feel something and you look off to the side and you can see it for a minute, but that's that. um so yeah, so it was just, it was like they were always there, like a guardian more say than anything. And I'm grateful that it was like a positive spirit, if anything, because I know that the opposite exists for that. And, I think I kind of opened my own can of worms when I was younger. I wanted to like be so immersed in that other side that I would use like Ouija boards, and like really strange things would happen from that that just like kind of taught me to not mess with like the darker side of it all.
How did you know that you were coming into contact with the dark side with the Ouija board, and at some point you stopped using it, right?
Yeah, I remember like, oh, this is like a vivid memory I have. I must have been like 10 or 11. And my mom, we bought one from like a Toys R Us or something. So it wasn't like a true Ouija board, but I remember using it with my best friend's mom. And I asked who we were speaking to. And I wasn't moving it. I mean, like it really does. Like if you lightly press it, it'll just go. And I remember working with her, and I said, who am I speaking with? And it said Eleanor. And Eleanor was my dad's mom, who I'd never met. She'd been passed before I was even born. And that woman did not know my grandmother's names or any past relative of mine. So like that was the first step. The second time I used it, it started spelling, and I can't remember the name, but it started spelling like a demonic type name.
Mhm.
And at that point, like I still get chills like thinking of it. At that point, I couldn't do it anymore. And like I remember that night I had to sleep with my mom because I was terrified, and I was like convulsing the whole night. Like I was so scared that I was like physically shaking the whole night. And I was like, to this day, I'm like, I hope I didn't let something in or whatever that may be, because it was just such a weird, surreal reaction to that dark side. And from that point, like we put it under the couch, never played with it again because I was so freaked out. And like I was the kind of kid that like to this day, The Exorcist is like my biggest, scariest movie, because the scariest thing that could happen to me is like a real life possession if they exist.
Yeah. Did you ever do anything to make sure that there weren't any dark entities attached to you?
Yeah, I growing up I went to mediums a lot too. So I would try to do like energy work with them if I could. I remember like Googling like the salt circles and things like that, like tiny little rituals you can do for yourself. I've never gone and said like, hey, is there something attached to me, or like, is there anything? Only because I feel like if there were, somebody would have like brought that up.
Mhm.
Um, but maybe not. So, I was never, I think once I got the taste of like the dark side of everything, I was really careful how close I got to that kind of practice.
Why do you think it's important to be careful with, because it's kind of wild that they sell Ouija boards as toys, right there with the board games, really. It's
I
crazy.
know. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of insane that like you could go to a store and be like, oh, I want to mess with the undead, essentially. But I think, I wonder if they even still do. I feel like I haven't seen one in a long time, but
I don't know. I haven't,
I mean,
maybe I'll look next time I go to Toys R Us, right?
right. No, I don't know. I think that like people just don't take it seriously, and that's where the worst thing comes into play. And like I get it. Like it's such an interesting, like beyond us kind of thought process to think that you could let that kind of energy come into you. But I think energy is so strong. I think that if there are like spirits or energies beyond what we are, like they're so receptive to what you're going through. And that's what I've always kind of learned is like when you're at your lowest, that's when you're the most vulnerable. And like when you're that stripped down, like that's when the bad things can kind of come to you. But it's also like when the good things can come as well. I remember reading like if I ever wanted to like tap into becoming a medium or like seeing if I have that energy, people would say like meditation and like your sleep elements are like when you're most vulnerable to like getting those kind of signals or messages and things like that.
Take me back to like the situation you were in when you started using the Ouija board for the first time. Was it a situation where like you had some friends around and it was, late at night, kind of a sleepover thing, or was it, or was it kind of like a party gag kind of thing that you guys wanted to?
Yeah, I think for most of us, I think for me, because that was like my interest, like the supernatural, like for me, it was kind of like exploring the untapped world that I was so interested in. But like up until that point, I was still young and naive. Like I didn't know how risky, I guess, you could get in opening that up. But I think a big part of it is like just that afterlife experience. And like I was so interested in like speaking to my grandparents who I'd never known and like understanding what's beyond us. But it's hard to know like if that really is who you're speaking to or if you're letting something else kind of communicate.
The man with the dog. How
Mhm.
did you come to know that was the story, that he killed his dog accidentally and he died too, or so how did
Yeah.
you come to know that? Take me through that.
Yeah, it was just, after all those years of like giving those hints. So I think the first kind of clue was like having that conversation with my older neighbor, who again was like in her 80s. She had been a part of that neighborhood for so long. Like I was describing his clothes. Like he wore a plaid flannel. He was, wearing light colored jeans. He was thinly built, his dog, what that dog looked like. And as soon as I said that, she immediately was like, wow, that sounds a lot like the guy who lived there. And so when I brought that back to my parents at the time, I mean, I must have been like 12, between the ages of 12 and 14. So they didn't even acknowledge that at that moment. It wasn't until I was like 23 years old. Like I remember driving in the car and my dad had said, yeah, the guy before us actually died because he fell asleep in his garage and the fumes went up and killed his dog. And I looked at my dad and I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I've seen this ghost for decades now and I've told you that. And like, nobody ever kind of like sparked that. But as much as my like dad was like the initiator of like the supernatural, he was very much like, yeah, I like watching it for entertainment, but I don't believe in that. So I think that's the other part is like, a lot of people don't believe in it. So when you tell them these things, it's like, oh, if you're a kid, then you're just imagining things. If you're an adult, then you're schizophrenic or something.
Yeah. Man, I wouldn't mind going at the same time as my dog. I mean, in theory, because I don't really want to live life without my dog,
I
and
know.
it's so sad. Like, I mean, it makes me want, like, the fumes rising through the floor seems like that's crazy. Like, I've never
Yeah.
heard of something like that. I
Yeah.
wonder if the dog decided that he wanted. Wonder if the dog understood that his master just died and that he wanted. I don't know. You don't know. I mean,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Like very like Romeo and Juliet, but dog owner.
yeah. That's a sad story.
Yeah.
Did you ever? Why did your dad wait until you were 23 to tell you?
I have no idea. I think he just like didn't believe in it, honestly. And I think he probably was like, I'm not gonna like agree to this and freak her out for the rest of her life. Because I was like a sensitive kid, so I think that would have like really freaked me out to know like I was living with these ghosts. Like I could see it and feel it, but to me it was like, oh well, there's no significant proof. So is this real or am I just imagining this? So I think for them, they're like, we're not gonna freak her out. Or maybe he didn't, honestly, in his brain. I would believe it if it like never even clicked for him. But it is interesting. Like, I mean, that thread has always stayed with me. Like I had those experiences as when I was younger. I went to Penn State and they had like a paranormal group that I would like tag along with once in a while. We would go into like the stacks, which were like the library, which were like notoriously haunted. Um, and then even beyond that, I think it's just something that you always wonder about and you always think about, and it's cool to have a connection to that, at least to say like I've had these experiences, so I know there's something, I just don't know what it is.
Did your parents and siblings also see them or not?
They never said they did. No. Mm-mm.
Yeah. And you said when it sounds like you could at some point make out some detail, like, but it was more out the corner of your eye, but you could kind of see some detail.
Yeah, but with both of them too. I never got the story with the second ghost I would always see,
The
but
lady.
yeah, the lady. She looked like she was probably like 16 years old. She always had like a white, kind of those old-fashioned gowns on, like a sleep gown. I remember she had like long brown hair. Um, and she was just like such a curious spirit. I remember feeling that. Like I remember anything I was doing, like she was, I feel like the guy and the dog were more of like a protective guardian, and she was more of like a curious spirit. And I almost feel like there were things that had happened in the basement of my home that felt more attached to her, and anything upstairs was very much attached to him. So I don't know if they were like coexisting and they were just like, hey, I'll take the upstairs, you take the downstairs, let's go haunt, or what. But that's where it always felt.
Do you think that the ghosts were like conscious entities or more of like imprints or reflections of like their life there? What do you
That's
think?
interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think for the girl, I would attach a consciousness to her because I think for her, it was always that curiosity. Like she wasn't just existing there, she was more so like doing something. I remember a friend told me she spent the night with me. I don't know if she was making this up because of things I had said, but again, we were younger, we were kids. And I remember we spent the night in like our spare bedroom upstairs, and we had like a sleepover. And I remember her saying the next morning, like, oh, I saw a girl in the room and she was like looking at the alarm clock. Like she was so enamored by this alarm clock, which like kind of adds up because if you're from the 1800s, you're probably looking at like an analog clock. Like, what the hell is this? I've never seen this in my life. But that I would attach to. The man, I don't know. The man, I think knowing his story, he was probably more of like an existence tied to like his home and the background there because his death was not a kind death. Like it wasn't something good or positive. And I almost wonder if maybe he just like woke up from that in the afterlife and thought like, okay, like I'm still home, I'm still here. This is just my normal day to day now.
Did you ever come into any insight on maybe why decided to kill himself?
No, I never got any history, and I would have loved to like deep dive into like our home records or something to figure that out.
You mentioned consciousness, and that maybe the lady had consciousness. And what do you think the nature of consciousness is?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I mean, it's so complex, I think, more than anybody ever thinks of. And I think, we were kind of talking through the podcast and like topics, and I think I especially became very obsessed with this idea of consciousness in the afterlife and what happens beyond that when I lost my mom last year. So all I read continuously is that there's this idea of us existing as energy, and energy can neither be created nor destroyed, right? So once you're gone from a physical body, like your energy goes somewhere, and where does that go? Does it become a spirit in some middle ground? Does it become, I don't know, the particles that now exist in the flowers in the air, whatever that may be? And I don't know. And I have been trying so hard to like research this and just to get a better understanding of like where a loved one is once they're gone. And I do think that there's got to be this element of like what is inhabiting like our thoughts and everything that has to exist beyond that. I just don't know what it is. It's so complex, truly. I hope so, because if not, like how depressing to think that everything is just lights off and maybe we all are just crazy like imagining things.
Yeah. Well, of course, like most of the world's religions are kind of set up in a way to bring some kind of structure or a sense of security to these
Mhm.
questions specifically.
Right.
Did you grow up in a faith tradition?
I grew up going to Catholic school. I was very attached to that only from like a school perspective. You know, I went to church when I was younger, but I was not like a practicing Catholic. I'm baptized, of course. Like that was just like what you do when you grow up in like a city of Philadelphia, and that's like the school system you go to. But it's not anything that I've ever attached myself to, but I will say I've always felt like I'm a spiritual person. So I love the idea of, you know, connection and existence beyond us, and that there is like when I meditate and think about a creator or something, I think of like a Jesus figure with dreadlocks and like a really cool guy who you would just like go sit down and have like an old fashioned next to. It's not per se like a God or Jesus that the Bible depicts per se.
Um, Meditation. Tell me about that aspect of your life. What initially got you into doing that, and how long have you been doing it, and how's it been going?
Yeah, it's been on and off for me. I think it's always just been like a really great space to shut off for me. I'm like such a mental person, I think 1,000 times over. So that has always been a space for me to, you know, take a breath, to shut off from the world. And I do think even more so now, like it's a big tool for me to feel like there is kind of a connection to my mom or to the people I want to reach in the afterlife too. I think there's, again, like I've read so often, and that is a time that like your mental space and your like aura is like in a sense of like shut down and just like quietness and letting you get to that level where you could like engage with somebody who is beyond your kind of plane of existence. So I think it's like a mix of like just trying to open myself up to those, because I welcome anything from my mom if she can bring it or will bring it, whether it's a dream, you know, a sign, things like that. And then also just like the mental clarity of it all.
Is there anything that you get from meditation that is new in your life? Like once you started doing it, did it bring anything? Did it gift you anything?
Yeah, I think just like stillness, which is like the best thing I could ask for. I wish I was better at practicing it and like staying consistent with it. But like when I'm in that, that's when my head is just so much clearer and just so much quieter. And I love that.
Yeah. Is there a specific type of meditation that you do? Do you do it in conjunction with yoga or anything like that?
No, I've never been a yoga girly, but I love just like sitting down and like using one of those like apps, like the Calm app is a good one, things like that. Like I need it to be bare minimum. Like I've got too much in my life to like I wish I was like high priestess, like shut off yoga's poses and everything. But for me, it's
Right.
got to be like quick and easy.
Yeah. Um, what do you think that this whole paranormal side of life that you've experienced, what do you think that says for perhaps the limitations that, the institutionalized religions, I mean, they've set up certain systems for certain reasons, and maybe explaining, the true nature of the afterlife, of the spirit world, isn't their main priority. So do you think that there's any, you think I'm onto anything there, or what do you think?
Yeah, I know. I definitely think that, you know, structured religion is interesting. Like I don't want to bash anything that anybody believes in or, you
Right.
know, finds value in, but you know, some of it can get a little extreme and it feels like it's kind of detached from like the true nature of what it's built out to do. I think the biggest correlation that any structured religion is trying to teach on a very like low level, and then also what the paranormal and like afterlife can offer, is the fact that like you're only here for a short amount of time. And like when you're here, you need to really like focus on kind of putting out something better for the world. Like I think that's kind of, you know, what is it? What is like the age old tale of like, you know, do unto others as you would do unto yourself or whatever, you know, I'm
The
taking
golden
this
rule.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, the golden rule of like just being a good person, but also knowing that there's so much more beyond what we have access to. Like it just has to exist. Like there has to be something else. Like our brains are only tapped to a certain degree. Like when we die, we are energy. Where does that go? Like something has to exist beyond this bigger picture. If I don't believe it's going to be like we die and we go to the pearly gates and we talk to Jesus about everything we've done. You know, I think maybe there is like a universe of this beautiful space, the brightest colors you've ever seen, the most intense feelings you've ever felt of like happiness and good things. Like maybe that exists, but I don't know. I really wish there was some scientific proof. I think it would be so cool to know what exists, but it's just so beyond our reach. And I think
Yeah.
religion is just here to keep it centered for now.
Yeah, I think, the whole quantum side of science will probably have something to say about this if it hasn't already. I'm not a quantum physics, quantum anything expert, but, I am familiar with the double slit experiment, which demonstrated that our intention and our observation actually changes, the outcomes of a random number generator just by
Mm,
observing it.
true.
And so that to me is like at least, you know, a crumb of a larger cookie that is going to be awesome for us to get, for everybody to fully understand and be educated on, as we move forward here.
Mhm.
But also like I didn't want to like I don't want to sound like I was bashing religion or anything, because so many of the people in my life and so many people that I grew up with, that's very important to them. My dad was a preacher, and I can't say that my interactions with the mainstream Protestant Christianity that I came up in, it's a mixed bag, but I can't say that I didn't get any value from it.
Yeah.
What kinds of things do you kind of carry with you that maybe you learned in Catholic school? Hopefully your knuckles have, healed from the bruising of the rulers slapping your
Yes. Old school
I don't
nuns
know.
were not messing
Did,
around.
was that a thing?
Not for me. I definitely for my dad. I think they like toned up a little bit by the time I was in there, but they were strict as hell. Like they probably less strict even now, but they were brutal. And I do think I just go back to learning just the idea of a creator, of an existence. And I think that's where I like that like looser, fluid, like interpretation of what religion may or may not be. Like, is there a creator? Yeah, there could be. There could be 17 of them. There could be one of them. Like, is there a universe beyond us? Yes, probably. Is there a life after life? And I think when I look at like religion versus atheism or anything beyond that, or like the scientific avenue of it, it's like you're going through life and you're living this beautiful kind of scenario or a really shitty life or whatever it may be. I think that it just instills for me this like space of hope and just the fact that like there will be something beautiful or interesting or bigger beyond this. Like there has to be, right? Because if you think the alternative and you're going to want to bash that by being like, pro physics, pro science, pro, whatever it may be, that's so depressing. Like who wants to sit here and think like one day everything we've done on this earth and everything we've created, everything we've suffered through, everything we've built, everyone we've met, in one day we're just going to close our eyes and it's just going to be darkness forever. Like how could that exist, And I just think there is this element of and just like what is the term for that? I can't blank on it when you like come back to life.
Reincarnation.
Yeah, like reincarnation. Like I know there's no scientific proof of it all, but like I do like that religion kind of teaches a second chance, not to just like justify what people do in a really shitty capacity. Like I hate that element of like, wow, you've killed 20 people on this earth and now you're just going to die, go to heaven and be forgiven. I think that's insane. But like for the people who like really do want to have a second go or want to build something beautiful again or deserve that second chance, it's nice to think about that.
Yeah, I mean I wonder if kind of the systemization and institutionalization of, I'm going to say that 5 times fast, institutionalization of religion, of kind of the understandings of spirituality and, the things that we cannot see. I want a lot of religion was set up in conjunction with the state, or as kind of like a proxy of the state, especially like in history, where you have
Mhm.
the emperors or Caesars that are,
Mhm.
demigods or somewhat gods on, various versions of a god. And as part of that, you gotta, I guess, like, humans believe that they need to have some sort of a submission of the people that are within that community, within that religion. I'm just spitballing here. Like, I'm not a history expert here, but I'm just kind of thinking about how or why they may have been set up that way, and why certain books did not make it into the Bible, and that we're discovering them so many years later. I mean, any
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Oh, I think you're right. I think everything, when it's so structured like that and it's separated from like teaching you something valuable. I mean, think of like the old school of like the Bible taught you only a man and women can lie together, things like that. It's just you can tell there were standards set for a time that just wasn't what it is today. And they were just trying to like put a pin in something. They were trying to keep people in a box and keep them like behaving the way they wanted them to behave. And I think it seems like in some space, there's been a lot of religions that have kind of branched off from that kind of belief and still want to maintain the positivity and the, community of what they intentionalized. But I don't know. I totally agree that there are just some extremes where you're like, this is not for the good of anybody, actually. This is so detrimental. And I'm glad that like religion, again, I've never been a religious person. I never felt fulfilled by Catholicism. I never felt good being in a church. I just think it's a little too extreme for me. But again, I like the spiritualness of it. I like the community. I like feeling like you belong to something and that you're not alone, and that there are things that exist beyond this whole world. So it's nice that like people and practices have established kind of segues into a more healthy kind of dynamic into religion and what that means for the afterlife.
These days, what do you think the nature of the afterlife is?
Yeah, it's been like such a crash course for me because I've just been so desperate to understand that after losing my mom. And I don't know, I had a dream after she died, and I remember going to bed, and it was like during that pre-meditative experience because I was reading, if you want to see people in the afterlife, like ask them, like before bed, ask them to visit you in a dream. And I've had very few dreams from my mom, which it's been it's been when you don't lose somebody, it's very easy to believe in the afterlife. When you lose somebody and know how that person is, it's hard to believe in the afterlife because my mom was nosy. She wanted to be involved in everything. I know this woman would be in every aspect of our lives showing herself if she could choose that. And she doesn't. It took a long time to see signs. It took a long time to see her in dreams. But I do remember very early on, I asked her, I said, show me what you see and where you are. And she took me back to her. She was on hospice a few days before she passed. Um, and she took me back to, like she took me back to her hospice room, and she started to float above everybody. And she took me to a wide open space, and she said, Kier, everything's beautiful. It's just so beautiful. And I was actually, she didn't show me anything. I remember she just said it. She rose above us, and I was like begging her in the dream to like show me what it looks like. And she just said, everything's beautiful. It's so beautiful. And then I woke up, and I felt like that was one of the first dreams I had from her, maybe 4 months after she passed. And it just felt so surreal. And in my mind, I don't know what she sees, but I think I do believe in it. I really do. I think that's probably what the afterlife is. And I don't know, maybe it's construed of what you want to make it. For me, I'd be so depressed to like die and go to like a wide open, beautiful field. I don't care how beautiful it is. Like, I'd rather be somewhere different. And maybe that would look different for me then. Maybe that was her form of beautiful, or it's just where all energy goes. We're just in one large space. I'm still trying to figure it out, but
it's a mystery, and I feel like at least some part of this life is kind of like maybe we were put here to explore the mystery in some way. It seems like, it seems like there aren't that many humans out there where, this journey of discovery doesn't take shape in some form, and maybe that's something that all of humanity kind of has in common, which kind of, when I think about it, kind of gives me a little bit of hope, because we're kind of all on this journey together, trying to figure out what the nature of us really is.
Yeah.
Has so paranormal activity, ghosts, has this continued since your early adulthood? Can you talk about that a little bit if it has?
Yeah, I don't really pick up on it much anymore, and I'm kind of sad about that. And I was thinking about that before our podcast. I was like, wow, I feel like I was so open to it in the past, and now I don't get as much as it. And I remember that's kind of like a thing. I remember reading how much more kids are open to seeing ghosts. And then as you get older, you kind of just start to block that stuff out, I guess, because maybe you believe a little bit less, or life just kind of gets too crazy to really quiet everything so you hear it. But I don't. But I will say I'm still very like open, and I can pick up on energies very well. And I think it depends on like places. Like it's so funny. I'll be like scrolling on TikTok, and there's so many things I get where so many people believe in the same thing. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with like Ocean City, Maryland, but there's a boardwalk.
I used to go there when I was a kid.
Yes. Okay. So you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. Do you remember like the boats, that like boat ride that was like just there and you would sit in the boats? It's been around forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I remember that.
Just the rides in general. There's like, I ran into a TikTok where like millions of comments are saying how like that space gives everybody like the worst, eeriest vibe. And it's so funny.
Really?
Yeah. And
it's,
like
the amusement park is called Wonderland, isn't it?
I think so. Something like that. But yeah, there's something about like spaces like that, like that's kind of reassuring when you realize that other people who are also, I guess, sensitive to energy are like picking up on like that eeriness. So I think that's it. I wish I would have practiced more to be more open to that. But I think after the Ouija board stuff, I was like, I don't know if I want to open this can of worms. Like, I'm not trying to end up like friggin' good old exorcism.
I think if you ever do decide to kind of open that can of worms again, I think this time you'll probably do it with a little bit more experience, a little bit more wisdom, and you'll probably, because in recent months I've kind of learned, about this idea of opening and closing a circle of protection, I guess, or of invitation, of consent. You don't want to, just like a house guest, you don't want them to stay forever. But a visit is great. Well, hopefully it's great. The dark ones, I'm not so so sure that you want to hang around them too much. But for pleasant spirits like your mother, like my mother, I don't know if I said that I also lost my mom. Shortly before you did, about six months or so, or 6-8 months. And it's been, I think this is probably the third time I mentioned this on the podcast about this cardinal coming to my window for a couple weeks after I moved into my new place. And did you happen to see the Disclosure movie? Did you go to Disclosure Day?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so you can imagine that scene in the movie kind of really hit me hard. So let's talk about the Disclosure Day movie. What did you think about it, and what do you think about this whole UFO thing coming into the public consciousness in more of a prominent way? It's kind of a front burner kind of news item, and people are interested. Over a billion or something people got online to look at those files that the government released initially. I think people are less enthusiastic now, but what do you think of it? What do you think of this whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't go down that wormhole too much, and I'm not smart enough to talk on the UFO stuff for sure, but I think it just goes back to like the knowledge of like there is such a larger existence of something. Like we cannot be the only things in this universe, in this timeline, whatever it may be. Like that's why I just love those conspiracies. And, I say conspiracies by that nature because there has to be some truth to this eternal thing, like it just, yeah.
So you wouldn't be surprised if there were other folks out there and maybe they're taking a look at us and watching us. What do you, if they are out there, what do you think that they're thinking when they're looking at us?
God, I don't know, probably that we're just so far behind what we are capable of, like I don't know. I just think that it comes down to like us just not us being so simple-minded to them probably, like I think we probably have it all wrong. We're just so focused on consumerism and like being the best of everything and all the intentions we have of just like hurting each other at times, like I think there has to be this level from their mindset of just like there's so much more to living. Like there is so much more depth to what you're focusing on and it's like snap the hell out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of agree. They're probably looking at us and saying, "Come on, already! It's time." You know, uh,
Yeah.
it's yeah, we do spend so much of our lives and so much of our energy kind of like just dealing with like the mechanisms of survival. And a lot of that, as a race, especially now with the technology as it is and technology continuing to advance with AI stands to take at least a lot of people's jobs in some way, shape, or form.
So
You know, it calls into question like for in my mind anyway, it kind of calls into question like why do we actually set up businesses? Why do we set up corporations? Why do we set up governments? Why do on the corporate and industrial capitalism side of it, you set up a business to make money so that you can
Mhm.
live, and the more money you make, the more like the better you live.
Right.
Um, and there does kind of come there comes a time of like diminishing returns when you get to a certain level is what I mean I've made millions of dollars in my life, so I'm not sure where that level is where you kind of like have enough money and you don't really like anything else is just window dress. I'd love to get to that point,
Right.
um but yeah, it's just for me it calls into question like what the fuck are we actually doing with ourselves
Right.
that we've literally intentionally put ourselves on this rat race when evidence is starting to mount that there's a lot more going on here and that maybe we should embrace AI and maybe we shouldn't all have meaning, maybe we should all have meaningful occupations and jobs and somehow contribute. I think that's important. Like I like how some jobs, especially in the nonprofit sector, they're devoted to contributing something.
Yeah.
Not non-profit, there is the question about, nonprofits, many nonprofits actually doing their job and not just being some kind of a way to wash money and people to just, draw $500,000 a year salaries for kind of sitting on their ass.
Right.
So I
Right.
mean, so it's a mixed bag with humanity as is the case.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know where my question is and all that. I was just kind of ranting at you. I'm sorry about that.
Love it.
But let's get back to the weird stuff. You tend to you follow like horoscopes and astrology these days. Is that part of your life, or are you into that?
Yeah, I love astrology and I love understanding like personas through that. I think it's very valid. I really do.
Yeah. How what has it brought to your life, like your work with it? Like, what do you do exactly? How much energy do you put into it?
I mean, I don't really do like the whole like newspaper horoscopes. Like,
Right.
well, firstly, what is your sign?
My sign, I'm a Libra.
Okay, makes
Yeah.
sense. Love
Why does
that.
that make sense? Why is it?
I think I always describe Libras as like the golden retriever of the zodiac. They're very like loyal, very balanced, and very creative as well, and hardworking. So a lot of times Libras will be very business centric, but not in like an obvious way, like the way a different sign would be very like a Capricorn's very hardworking, very like stoic, things like that. Libras are more they're an air sign, so they're just like a little bit more lighter with it.
You actually said that to me when we first met in person that I was a golden retriever. That was like, I was pretty sure, yeah, that you were gonna buy me like a collar at the pet store or something.
That's so funny.
Give
You
me
and
like a little
Bruno,
name
man.
tag.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. Knowing your sign, like how does that like influence how you think or how you approach life? Like knowing kind of the characteristics and tendencies of what did you say? What sign are you?
I'm a Virgo,
A
so
Virgo. Okay.
yeah. I think Virgos are very judgmental for one, and not always in like a negative way, but like in an observational way. Like we want to know everything and we want to understand it all. We're also very like open and creative. So, I think for me, it just comes, astrology has always been like this really cool way to like just better understand people for me and to also like know what signs I don't want to, know the warning signs of who you may not interact with, or, from a personal perspective, from a love perspective, things like that. I think people will hate up and down on astrology and like give it a bad name, but I think it is really telling once you like learn and study. And I'm still in that space of studying. I'm not an expert at it, but I do like kind of feel like sometimes I can pick up on what somebody's sign is.
Yeah. Do you ever do anything with tarot cards?
I do. I love tarot readings. I seek them out in times of like wanting to know. I don't own a deck myself. That's something I've like wanted to kind of get into. But again, it's a lot of studying. I think a lot of people think you have to be like supernatural to do tarot, but it's really, again, just like understanding what the cards are telling you, understanding what it means for the bigger picture, for the questions that are being asked. So I do. I enjoy it. I believe in it? Maybe like 80%, 20%. I think it's a little like
80/20.
yeah, like I think there's room for like, oh, okay, there's some wiggle room here. But again, I think it all comes down, it's in the same vein of like that afterlife perspective of like it'll make you feel like there's more or hope or something beyond like what you have control over. And as a Virgo, we want control so badly. So it's nice to have something that makes you feel like you're in control when you're not.
Yeah, it's good to have like a steering wheel to hold on to at least. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of what's coming to mind as you say that. Um, what do you what do you think is happening with the person doing the reading, who's actually doing the tarot card reading? What is actually happening? Do you think the interaction between the reader and the cards, and what do you think is going on there?
Yeah, I think a lot of times people put every emphasis into the cards. Like the cards are who or what is driving the outcome of what you're asking. It's not so much the person. The person is kind of like that middleman, like the messenger per se. And that's why a lot of times, like if you work with a really seasoned tarot reader, like they will be able to understand things on a level that like a beginner will not be able to tell you. Like beginner can feel like you're inputting the cards into ChatGPT. And it's kind of fun, like going back to AI, like I just did a tarot reading maybe 2 weeks ago about like a job perspective. And the reading I got from it, from the person reading it, was very generic. So, I took a picture of the cards I had and I put it into ChatGPT and asked it for like a really in-depth reading, and it provided that. And I think that's where it's kind of like AI is definitely like a pain in the ass, but it also can like help you further like interpret the things you want to interpret. And it's almost like, how does AI know that? Like maybe there's something deeper there. I don't know. Um, but yeah, I think the person doing it is really and purely just the messenger. And I think it depends on how well they can understand like everything that's being like presented to that person. So they'll just pick the cards, flip it over, and that's that. And it also it matters how it shows up. So if it shows up like reversed, that means something different. If it shows up right side up, that means something different. So you have to study and you have to know.
Let's talk about witches. Etsy witches, to be specific. Apparently, you got on Etsy and found a witch, and paid her a little bit of money for some spells. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so it's like the newest trend right now. It's so funny. And it comes from like that tarot culture. So if you are like a TikTok user, you're going to get flooded by TikTok or like TikTok tarot readers and the Etsy world. They call them Etsy witches. So apparently there's like a new business where you can just go to these modern day witches who have Etsy accounts. They exist on TikTok or Instagram as well, but Etsy is kind of like what it used to be. And you pay them like X amount of dollars for a love spell, a money spell, a career spell. I just did one because we're going to Fort Lauderdale on Wednesday. And the weather, of course, is so shitty. It's like pouring rain all week. So I was like, you know what? If this works, it works. So let me throw like 20 bucks at an Etsy witch and get her to do like a weather spell. So now I'm just kind of like willy-nilly with it. Again, I actually did two maybe a month ago. And it's funny, I had like a TikTok that sourced, I made the TikTok, it got pretty viral. I sourced for like recommendations. There were two that people recommended who were fine, but like you can tell a lot of it, which is a bummer, is very AI generated. So I think some of these are definitely scam artists, or maybe they do have some level of like witchcraft knowledge, but like they're just like pumping a business. But I do think some actually exist in a good space, because there were in the comments there were a ton of stories that people did this and had this experience and it worked out. And I mean, who knows? Again, I think we're all just so desperate to like have some sense of control over our lives and know that like we've got something incorporated in the unknown, and that's really all that is. Do I think I'm gonna have sunny weather? I sure hope so. Will it be because of the Etsy witch? If it does, who the hell knows,
Yeah. I mean, it's like you mentioned the 80-20 rule again. I wonder which, is it 80% that's legit, or is it 20%?
Right.
I don't know.
Right. I kind of have a feeling it's probably 20%. I think everybody is out to monopolize everything, especially on social media. So shit, I could probably open up a witch talk account and start pumping it out and say, all right, $5 wishes, let's go.
Which, when you're using AI in conjunction with like these kind of esoteric activities, looking at tarot cards, reading your horoscope or talking to a psychic, which do you have a particular AI that you use?
I do love chat for like the kookier stuff. So like Claude's my strategy guy. And I don't know why I assume he's a guy, but Claude is like my strategy guy. Like if I want plans built out, I will do that. If I just want to have a conversation or like deep dive into emotional aspects, I always go to ChatGPT. I have no rhyme or reason for that. I just feel like ChatGPT like feeds into the emotional side, whereas like Claude's a little bit um Claude is like your friend that's a little bit skeptical and like only wants the facts and is like shooting the shit with you, whereas like ChatGPT to me is kind of the friend that you can sit and have a cocktail with and like talk about your deep dark secrets, and they're like, actually you're onto something, like, so maybe it feeds the delusion a little bit more. But I always like any aspect of myself, whether it's my sign, whether it's like I might say this wrong, like the Enneagram number, anything like that like tells you about yourself, I always input if I'm thinking about like a next step in something. So if I'm thinking about a career or, how I'm trying to perceive a conversation I had with somebody, like I always take into account like those kookier sides of like what makes up a person so that it can better evaluate like how I'm going to resolve everything through it.
Yeah, again, going back to trying to find answers and direction. It's we have a lot of tools for that. Whether it starts in religion or it's into these kinds of things that we're talking about. I feel like there's going to be a greater need. I feel like there's going to be more people searching and kind of going outside of their the traditional boundaries of their faith traditions. And I think that's okay. Like, I don't think people need to worry too much about exploring, to explore this esoteric side of life, this alternative spiritual side of life. It's not a dangerous thing. In fact, the you kind of hear, at least I kind of hear going up from certain sources that, oh, it's evil, it's of the devil, and I don't think people really need to worry too much about that. I think it's really tools that we've been given. And I had another question about ghosts. So do you still see ghosts?
I'm trying to think the last time I saw anything. I feel like there was a moment that I can't remember, but I do once in a while, like only very rarely will I see it. And it doesn't happen as often, and I'm really bummed about it.
Do you think if you picked with the Ouija board again that maybe that would help?
I'm not touching that thing. I'll tell you right now. I don't know what it is. I'm never touching that thing again. But yeah, I think it would, it would open something up. But I think that's where, I think I chose to end that chapter for myself because I didn't know where it would take me. And I got a little freaked out by that, but I digress.
Are you happier? Are you more comfortable on the path that you're on now?
I think so. Yeah. I think for me, I'm still just so open and receptive to like what is out there and getting signs. And, I would welcome that communication from the other side. I really would. If it's well intentioned and I knew how to navigate it, yeah, 100%. I would welcome that. But I think I just haven't been in a space where I've let them know that. So right now I have my own block up for sure.
What do you think the connection is between the potentiality of aliens and ghosts and other paranormal phenomena? Do you think they're all connected, or do you think that we're looking at different things?
I honestly, when I step outside of it, I do think they're different because I think it comes from, again, ghosts are like on a different, I don't know what you call it, energy level, atmosphere, plane, not atmosphere per se, but a different existence level. Like, maybe there's two timelines that exist. Maybe there's theories beyond about that. Maybe there's, different universes and not space universes, but like, you know, existence universes. I think aliens are like living and breathing currently.
Yeah.
I think if they're here, they're existing, maybe not on our planet, but like they are kind of coexisting with us. Whereas like I don't think ghosts coexist. I think they, exist in a different plane than us.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the debates out there is whether these aliens are interdimensional or intergalactic.
Mm-hmm.
And, and when you start to dig into like the nature of the universe and of space and time, like those two concepts, like dimensionality and, whether you're in our current, whether you're in this current 3D space or in another dimension, so to speak, like those two concepts kind of start to overlap
Mm-hmm.
because just because time and space, the more science looks into it, I believe, like the less linear it becomes, and the more mysterious, and like the deeper you look, the more mysteries there are. So I
Mm-hmm.
think I think there's something to that. I'm not a scientist. I'm just a writer and a podcaster.
Right.
So take what I say with a grain of salt, but yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see where we're headed.
Yeah.
With the alien UFO thing, for me, the reason one of the reasons I started this podcast is just because, you know, it's coming into the mainstream. Whatever powers that be have decided that now is the time to start talking about this stuff, and they're kind of, and having said that, I'm kind of kind of like get on with it and stop giving us a bunch of blurry
Right.
photos, on some
Right.
website somewhere. Like for so many people, this phenomena is not going to register as real until we see an alien on TV on the nightly
Totally.
news or something like
Right.
that. Like, and hopefully it's not one of the weird looking ones. Hopefully they start us off with the Nordics who kind of look like us. If that's actually the case, that there's some Norwegian people out there that apparently, well, at least they look Norwegian or Swedish or Scandinavian. Have you heard that's like one of the,
No. Are we thinking like
yeah.
Holland Erling or whatever, Erling Holland, whatever his name is? The soccer star, is that like who they're looking like?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yes, somebody like that. So maybe he's an alien.
Right.
I really enjoyed watching him in the World Cup,
Yeah.
a couple of games. He's an interesting cat. But yeah, exactly. They apparently look, at least the Nordics, and then there's the insectoids, like giant praying mantis looking things, and of course you've heard of the Greys, and then you have the reptilians, and these are like the four races that they've actually talked about on like the nightly news, on CBS, NBC, like these old mainstream legacy kind of media outlets, who are talking about this. And this is probably the biggest thing, is that these kinds of places that we grew up with, that the Tom Brokaws, and I don't know even who Peter Jennings, these people that we grew up with watching the news, like what's happening now is essentially the same thing as them talking about this in a serious way. People aren't snickering anymore. They're talking about it in serious tones. Yeah. And to me, like, that's probably the biggest change, and one of the more welcome changes for somebody who's been following this basically since I got on the internet in the mid 90s for the first time, and started looking at conspiracy websites, because that was a big part of the early internet, were these websites talking about UFOs and UAPs.
Yeah, I remember.
That's kind of how I first got into it. So,
anytime I meet somebody that works for the government in any capacity, like jokingly, I always have to ask, like, so are aliens real? And like, it's a joke, and they don't say yes, but they never say no. So it's like,
Yeah, I've met a couple people in the last year or so that were in the Air Force and the Space Force, and I'm trying to get them to come on the podcast. Trump just put out some kind of an executive order or something that he's giving some kind of whistleblower protection for people that want to come forward to these committees that they've set up. There's a couple of, like, the Arrow office is the one that's kind of under the executive branch that Trump has kind of dominion over. There's like some other organization. I'm not completely sure of all the specifics of it, but they have these investigative committees that, and a lot of the reason is like these companies, these aerospace companies and also ex-military, like a lot of people apparently have a lot of things they could be talking about, but they can't, because they're under NDAs, they're under security clearance restrictions. Like, they just can't talk about this stuff because it's classified, and to do so would put them at risk, would put their families and their well-being at risk. So I completely understand the reason why so many apparently are keeping their mouths shut. So I do kind of see this development with Trump putting this out. I don't know exactly what kind of teeth it's going to have, or if it's just going to allow whistleblowers to go to the government committees rather than somebody like me, a journalist. But I'm hoping that at some point I'm going to be able to get some people to come on here and talk about what they know, and do it in a way that's not going to get them in trouble, because I don't want that. But it's an amazing time we have that we're going through right now, and I'm just happy that you had time to get on here and talk to me and join me on my adventure in podcasting. I'm sure we could probably keep it going for another couple hours, but I know you are a working professional and have responsibilities, and probably have a big meeting coming up, which I know you do. So I'm not going to keep you too much longer, but. Thank you for coming on the Crew One podcast, Kiersten Aldridge. Let's do it again some other time, because like I said, I think we can keep going with this.
Yeah. Thanks, Adam. It was fun.
Yeah, this is great talk. It's always good seeing you. Like, you're one of my favorite new friends that I've met over the last year or so, and I'm glad that we've been able to stay in touch. I'll let you go, and once again, thank you for joining us on the Crew One podcast, and let's keep looking up.
Cool. All right, bye.
See you later.